Welcome! My name is Kelly Anderson, and this is Fanimated, an animation fan podcast where we get a chance to geek out about our favorite animated media. This week, Kate Callan and Laura Wacker-Hansen are joining me to discuss Disney's 2019 animated feature film, Frozen 2. The phenomenally successful sequel to its 2013 predecessor, Frozen 2 explores Anna and Elsa's thrilling journey into the unknown. But before we get started, I want to thank our supporters over at patreon.com/Fanimated. This podcast would not be possible without the Patreon crew, and you can join their ranks to hear bonus content from this episode and vote for upcoming episode topics for just $1 a month. Now, here's your spoiler warning for Frozen 2, and let's get started and let's get animated. Kate and Ferg!
Yay, Fergus!
A new member of the podcast. The cutest little poodle you ever did see.
He's pretty cute. He's the best.
He's the cutest.
If you want to know what Ferg looks like, go look at Kelly's animation of Ferg, because they're pretty great.
On her Instagram.
Yeah, on her Instagram.
My Instagram is Canderdraw, Kanddraw.
We're introducing the dog just in case he barks in the middle of the podcast and you were wondering why one of us got so excited that we started barking. It was not a person, it was a dog.
Yes. And we are talking today about Frozen 2.
Yay!
The sequel to the incredibly successful 2013 film, I think was when the first one came out. I'm really excited about this one. We've been needing to talk about it since it came out, we've been ecstatic about it. And I've gotten a lot of requests to talk about Frozen 2, so thank you to everyone who messages me on Instagram at Fanimated Podcast or leaves a review on Apple Podcasts and tells me what to watch or sends us an email, because I really appreciate it, and then it makes me more excited to talk about the shows that you guys want to hear about. So we're here to talk about Frozen 2.
Yay! I am really, really excited to talk about this. For those of you who have listened to the original Frozen podcast, it was Kate, Kelly, and I who talked about it. And we had a lot of things to say. And I have been looking forward to doing this podcast ever since we saw Frozen 2 in the theater. Kate and I are roommates, and Kelly lives not super close to us, so we were not able to see the film together, but Kate and I went and saw it, and we're so excited about it that we had to call Kelly really late at night. We had gone to a late showing, and we couldn't even wait until the next day to call her and tell her about what we loved about the movie.
Well, and the best part about it was that we called her, and she picked up, and we were like, we just saw Frozen 2, have you seen it? And Kelly was like, I am just walking out of the screening of Frozen 2 that I just saw. Yes! So we ironically just saw it the same night at the same time, and we're ready and raring to talk about it.
It's one of my favorite things is hearing your guys' reactions to animated content, and I'm like, yes, this is what I live for. And when you first saw it last year, what was like the biggest thing that stood out to you? Like, what was your biggest takeaway when you first saw it?
I think coming out of it, I was just excited to have experienced this whole new piece of the world of Frozen. We got to see it at a different time of the year, a different season. We got to meet a new group of people. We got to experience a different landscape and a different part of the world that they lived in. And there was the story flowed through it, and there were things that I thought made sense and things that maybe didn't make as much sense, but at the end of the day, we just got to go back to that really kind of fun, special world that, that's always fun. It's fun to be able to go back and see something new instead of having to relive that world the same way over and over by watching the same film, so.
Definitely. What about you, Kate?
Yeah, I think that kind of bouncing off of that, like the expanded universe is something that's really cool. We only got to see kind of Kingdom of Arendelle, and then the mountain that Elsa retreats to in the first, but we don't really get to see kind of outside of that. And like you said, like a different time of year, like it just kind of highlights some of those. We get to meet like a different, culture and group of people that we haven't met in the first one. And I'm just, with every Disney musical, I'm just so excited about the music part of it. And I'm just like, I love the soundtrack to this movie. I think it is I think it's a better soundtrack than the first one, to be honest. I love some of these songs just so much. And yeah, so those were kind of my favorite bits of seeing it, for sure.
Yeah, all of those things are phenomenal. So when I go see an animated movie, or when I watch a new show or anything, when I have thoughts about it, I open up a new document on my computer and I start immediately writing my thoughts, so that I can, if we ever do a podcast episode on it, that I have some thoughts ready to go from when I'm watching it. And so, of course, after watching Frozen 2, I immediately opened up a new one, and the first thing that I wrote down after seeing it is, in full caps, "Lost in the Woods."
Yes, before we just rewatched all of it. We just rewatched it all together, and I think before we even pressed play, I was like, "Just so you know, this is my favorite part." And they were, Kelly and Katie were like, "Yeah, it's the best part."
I was dying in the theater.
Yes, same.
Okay, so I went with my sister and my mom, and this tiniest little rinky-dink theater in the world, and there was just like a whole bunch of little kids in the theater. It was great, which is, by the way, one of my favorite things is going to see these animated films for families and hearing all the children's reactions, because they love the crap out of Olaf, and I was like, yes, this is fantastic. But I'm watching Lost in the Woods, and I am internally screaming at this 80s music video that's happening in front of me right now, and no one else is laughing or making a sound, and I was just like, I was stifling my laughter. I couldn't take it.
Laura and I are slightly rambunctious movie/theater goers.
We like to interact.
We like to interact. We like to react out loud. We like to, make noises in traditionally quiet spaces. And Frozen 2 just had us like cackling, particularly that song. It was just so funny.
When I see movies that I know are family movies, just because I tend to, Fergus is squeaking his ball. I know that I am a little bit more of a rambunctious consumer of entertainment, and that I, sometimes my reactions are loud, sometimes they include adult language, as those of you who have listened to this podcast we may have snuck in a few times.
I usually try to cut it out.
But anyway, when I go to see family films, I try to go to later evening showings where it's not going to be as crowded, there's not families trying to enjoy it that I might be a little bit annoying, or it's just a chance for me to consume it as an adult a little bit more. And so when Kate and I went to see it, we went to a much later showing. It had been out for a few weeks also, but there were not very many people in the theater, and the people who were in the theater were all kind of teen and above. There weren't any children in the theater. And so that made it, we were able to kind of have those more adult reactions to the storylines, and we were able to just like cackle at Lost in the Woods, because I speak a lot when I watch films, and I was sitting there and I leaned over to Kate and I was like, the first chord starts, and I was like, this kind of sounds like an 80s rock song. This is okay. And then the picture comes up, that first scene, and I was like, it is an 80s rock song. This isn't even, like, inspired by. Like, they just full on went for... And it's cute because that's what makes family films really, really good. Some of the films that I And when you say family entertainment, that doesn't mean that it's entertainment for children. It means that it's entertainment for all different ages that people can watch together, but that there are elements of it that children won't understand, and that's what makes it fun for the adults to watch, right? And a child is not going to realize that he's singing an 80s rock music. Right. He's producing an 80s rock music video starring him and reindeer. And that was one of those touches that I thought they did really well, because it makes it, it's beautiful animation, and it's fun. It's fun to have those little touches that are just for adults. Like, that was something that was just for the adults.
It was. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was dying.
We're just laughing. We're all just looking at each other and laughing right now. And I also was happy. Kate and I have a particular affinity, I don't know if you do, Kelly, for the actor who voices Kristoff.
Oh, absolutely.
He's the best.
We have followed his musical theater career quite closely. And I've had big crushes on him for a lot of our lives. And so I was excited that he got his own song, and his character got his own song where half of the voice wasn't him doing reindeer voice, because he's such an accomplished...
Yeah, that was my biggest disappointment from the first film. It's like, really? You hired Jonathan Groff to do the voice of this character, and you didn't give him a song? Like,
yeah, and so that was something I really wanted out of this film, was I'm like, he's just such a phenomenal vocalist. I hope that he can I'd like to hear him sing. And so when he got not only his own song, but a song where he just harmonized with himself the whole time, and it was like this epic rock song, and I just loved it. I thought they did a great job with that. I liked that moment for Kristoff. And there weren't a lot of things that I liked for Kristoff in this film, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Upon watching it a few more times, but that moment for him I thought was really, really great, because his character doesn't have a lot else to do in the film.
Right.
So at least his song was great.
Yeah, if anything, he has the best song in the whole movie.
Which, like I said, I love all the songs from this movie, so it's hard to pick a favorite, but that one is definitely...
Yeah, so let's just keep going with the music, because that is one of the biggest things that holds this franchise up above the other Disney franchises is the music, and that's what we expect out of Disney regardless. And they deliver.
For sure.
You, Kate, said, you like this soundtrack better than the original, right?
Yeah. I mean, maybe with the exception of Let It Go, because that's just such a... I feel like at this point, it's an iconic song, right? Yeah. Everybody and their mother knows Let It Go, presumably. But I just think, and maybe it's because the music is newer and not quite as overplayed at this point, but I just think particularly... I love Into the Unknown. That's such a good song, but particularly Show Yourself is just such a, triumphant piece of music. I think it's really the centerpiece of the songs in the film, and I love the whole thing.
I think one of the things that I really liked about this soundtrack, and I use a lot of conjecture when I talk about things. I have no idea if what I am, hypothesizing was a reason for something truly was, but in the first film, the music was fun, and it kind of goes with the story, and different characters have different songs they get to sing. But, it's there's different types of songs with different, there has to be a silly song, and there's one serious song. It's Let It Go, right? And then there's a romantic duet, and then there's, the silly snowman song, and then it kind of, you can imagine that when they're sitting down and picking, these are the types of songs to, make it so that it's not boring. We want people to not get bored with the music. And then, the standout song of that film was Let It Go. And it's it's this serious, extreme belting ballad that every little girl cannot stop singing.
Yeah.
We can just write a bunch of those and put them in this, and so I almost feel like the music was written to fit the characters and fit the story a little bit more.
Yeah.
And less we need...
We need this kind of song here and this kind of song.
You could argue that Olaf's song is that, the film would have gone on just fine if Olaf hadn't sung a song about becoming an adult.
It is a great song.
It's a great song, but with the exception of that one, you know, I feel like it wasn't this like, oh, we need this type of song, or, you know, it's boring here. There's three really kind of slower ballady songs that the two main characters sing, and that they're great songs, and they let those characters have that moment and that storytelling through music, and that didn't really happen in the first one, and I don't think that happens in a lot of films or musicals or anything that has music. You know, they were able to kind of make the music that they wanted to make that fit the character. So
Right. Fitting the character and the story. And as a whole, like, I think every single one of the songs in Frozen 2 they just are so strong. Not that there aren't strong songs in the first, but that it is more of a collectively fantastic group of songs, and so I would agree that the second one has the stronger songs. Not to say that the first is bad by any means. But.
Well, you know what you could say too is that I know and Kelly, you know more about this than we do, but in the first film, they were working on the story like almost up until the movie, like till they set out the film to be screened. And so it's clear that, you know, the music that was there, it was written and it was more like, okay, this is what's going to happen, but they didn't really know the characters yet. It was music that fit into the storyline, but, you know, then the movie came out and people fell in love with these characters, and again, that world, we had a world to live in, and we had characters with personalities and feelings that had been established in that first film. And so the motivation for writing songs for there was a little bit more there, and maybe that's why they felt a little bit more personal, as you weren't just writing a song for this film called Frozen and it's the Snow Queen and she's on a mountain, write a song.
Right.
It's more like, okay, this is Elsa. You know who Elsa is, and this is what she's experiencing in the story, and how do you think Elsa would express that musically? So I think that, you know, the songs feel a little bit more personal because you have that benefit of you're writing songs for an actual character rather than just like a theoretical character.
Yes, they knew the characters more. They were coming at it, and I'm sure being like, we followed the Disney formula in the first one for what songs we need. We've proven we can do this, so now we're gonna, you know, really take it into our own hands, and we're going to maybe deviate from the normal Disney formula for what types of songs you need, and, you know, having so many of those like ballads and things. So definitely.
Yeah.
And I should mention, like, before we go on, like, I just totally skipped synopsis because I figure you've seen this film. You're listening to an animation podcast, and you're a human on the planet. I don't know.
If you haven't seen Frozen 2, but for some reason you picked an animation podcast to listen to, you are a unique person, and you should message Kelly.
And I love you, and I'm so glad you're here. And also, you should watch Frozen 2. But it is the sequel to Frozen. Obviously, Anna and Elsa go on an adventure in this magical forest where they kind of discover where Elsa's powers come from and a little bit about their parents' backstory, and they save Arendelle. The end. Very brief synopsis for you.
And a bunch of other people are there too, but we're not sure why, which is something we'll talk about in a little bit.
That's a theme in the Frozen franchise. Why is this character here?
Why is this happening?
Another thing I want to ask about the music, and because this was the big question you asked me in that first telephone call right after seeing the movie, was which is the new Let It Go? Is it Into the Unknown? Or is it Show Yourself?
It's Into the Unknown.
Yeah, I agree.
I think just how it relates to the character, and I will also say just from the sheer amount of small children that I hear screaming that one,
right?
compared to compared to Show Yourself,
yes.
it's Into the Unknown.
However, I would agree with that statement, that Into the Unknown, especially because Disney, I think, really marketed that one. strongly, and I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that Show Yourself is kind of a spoiler within the story itself. I mean, if you listen to it on its own, if you don't watch the movie with it, you don't get any of the plot points. However, it is kind of the climax of the character's journey, and so I think that's kind of why I think they leaned a little more towards Into the Unknown.
Right.
However, from a technical perspective, structurally, when we're looking at the music composition itself, Show Yourself is a little closer, I would say, to Let It Go in how it kind of builds.
In the structure.
But like I said, all of these songs were written for Idina Menzel to sing. She has an impossible vocal range, so let's thank the Lopez's for creating a generation of little girls with vocal nodes. The end.
Our dog is now eating, so if you hear in the background, this is going to be an interesting recording.
I love it. Marie's here.
So I would say just from, I think, the tone of the song, too, and the universal popularity of Let It Go came from it was simple. Little kids loved the way it sounded. It resonated with lots of different groups of people because it can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. The theme is very simple. Let It Go is, that's something every little girl loved. I think every person, what was so unique about that song is it captured something that's in everyone, and there's different groups of people that I think, it became something that a lot of people in the LGBTQ plus community felt like, this song is about me.
Yes.
It's something that I think anyone who listens to it and has a part of them that they want to let go, right? That's why that song was so universally loved. It felt like every single person understood that song.
Yes.
And I think that that's also kind of why Into the Unknown fits that category. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit more general. It's a little bit more, it's not as specific as Show Yourself. I think Show Yourself has more adult themes too that don't necessarily resonate as much with the younger audience, because it's at the climax of the film. We were discussing a lot while we were watching it that period in the film is, Elsa and Anna becoming adults and owning up to understanding things in adult ways and how that can be painful. Yeah. And so it's more of, I just think that the theme is a little bit more specific compared to the other one. I can't remember. Into the Unknown is like, we're talking about too many songs. It's like Let It Go in that the theme is very universal and that it can be, each person has felt that in their own way and it resonates with them, which is why a song would be popular, right? Popular songs are songs that resonate with a lot of people. So that's why I think that was the new Let It Go.
And I agree with you that Into the Unknown has become that. But here is my devil's advocate argument for Show Yourself. I mean, regardless of the fact that it is my personal favorite of the two, is that you have a lot of visual elements that are the same to Let It Go. Mm-hmm. She is clearing the way, the ice out of the way, and creating the ice pillars and the ice doorway and the ice stairs. She's doing all those things in Show Yourself. And she does her big dress transformation in Show Yourself, just like in Let It Go. So I would argue visually, Show Yourself and where it sits in the story is more like Let It Go. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or we could just say we got 2 Let It Goes this time around.
Yeah.
For Frozen 3, we'll get 3 Let It Goes, guys!
Yes, we got 2 Let It Goes for sure.
To continue talking about the lovely female ballads in this show, I would like to talk a little bit about Do the Next Right Thing.
Yes.
I think that it's really cool that Anna got a slow song and that she isn't just singing cutesy duets. And I actually I've watched Frozen 2 4 times now. And this, we have Disney Plus. I've watched it many times. But this time I really was listening to the lyrics a lot more. We watched it with the subtitles this time, which was fun. So I was reading the lyrics in addition to just taking in the film. And I almost appreciated that song a little bit more this time than I think I have in the past times. I have some issues, personal issues with the storyline in some places that lead up to that song. And so a lot of times I think I was just dealing with the fact that I was more frustrated and then not really paying attention to the song. There's some visual things in that song that have been very distracting to me in the animation of that song, which we will talk about later.
Sure.
But gosh, that was a really, really beautiful song. And whoever wrote the lyrics for that, I think clearly had dealt with a lot of personal loss and moving forward. You know, I think it's a song about picking yourself up and moving forward. And, you know, this sounds really, I don't mean to be morbid, but anyone who has lost someone really important in their life and kind of how do you pick yourself up and move forward and be a leader and be there for the people who need you and move forward and do the next right thing, right? That's actually like, it's a really, really beautiful song. And I think that that's I think that song was written to be a really important moment for Anna. I think that the storyline got so convoluted that it didn't deliver. It didn't deliver what it could have. Now that I really sat and listened to the lyrics of that song, and it's orchestrated really beautifully, and there are things she does in the scene that I don't like, but, you know, she's climbing out of the dark cave into the light to move forward, and that, yeah, gosh, it's a really beautiful song, and it's animated to work with the lyrics and to be really representative for the character. And now I'm almost kind of angry that she had that beautiful scene and sequence, and the storyline that surrounds it didn't make it so that it had as much of an impact as it should have, because gosh, that song is stunning.
And I think to kind of add on to that, like, you know, I think last time we talked about Frozen, I talked a little bit about Christabel and how I just think that her vocal performance in both of these movies is just so good. I think she just, like, so encapsulates Anna's character, and, like, one of her kind of vocal strengths is just, like, showing that vulnerable side of herself, and it's, like, it's just a voice recording, but you can just, like, you can feel the pain and the grief and the struggle in that performance, and it's such a beautiful song.
And I would agree with what you said, Laura. Like, the story does not support that song as much as it could have. And for Anna, this is definitely, for me, like, the moment where she is, you know, she's so dependent on her sister, and now her sister isn't there. Like, that is that actually is a really good story choice to take away completely the crutch that this character has, and that she realizes she has to move forward one step at a time. It is a very powerful song, and I would agree, when I first watched it, that song did not impact me as much as it did after consecutive viewings and consecutive, like, listening through that song multiple times. And now it's one of my favorite songs, even though when I first saw the movie, it didn't really leave as much of an impact as it could have if the themes had been a little tighter.
I agree. Yeah.
So I'd love to move into, like, talking about the story and talking about the elements that we like and some of the elements that we wish were different.
I'd love to start with some of the things I really liked.
Yes, please.
Being a big fan of science fiction and fantasy writing, I loved the elemental nature of this story.
Yes.
I thought that was very cool. I loved the traveling up into the kind of wilderness and the rune circle with the elements on them and the fog, and it was a little darker, right, than the first. And the first one was pretty dark, not to say it wasn't. Yeah. But I really liked the fantasy adventure element of this. I thought that was fun. I liked that it set us up. You know, we had the little harvest festival at the beginning, and that was fine. But it set you up for, we're picking up, we're going to a new place, it's a new story, and we're going to do something completely new and discover this new stuff. I loved that whole setting and that whole idea, and I like that they drew upon that kind of fantasy science fiction world for this, because that's the type of story that I really, really love. Yes. So that made me really excited.
I really love, and I will say in general, I think this is one of the best Disney sequels because I think that this story actually has a purpose. Like, this isn't just thrown together. It like a lot of Disney sequels are, where it's just like, and now their kids go on an adventure that's the same exact adventure they went on.
Yeah.
It's we're still with the characters, we're developing them further, developing their backstories, and one of the biggest things I love about this story is learning more about their parents. Like, those elements I absolutely love. I love that, you know, their mom is from the tribe, and that, you know, she saved their father, and I just love all those. Because I just like that kind of thing. Like,
Kelly loves parent-child relationships. She loves them.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And so because I love stories that are like, this is the story of the family, and that's what this is. This is like, this is Elsa and Anna inheriting a problem that their grandfather started, you know, and fixing it, and, you know, moving forward with it. And I love seeing how their parents have influenced them, and like Elsa and Anna understanding more about their parents' story and how they met, which is just freaking adorable. It like helps them, you know, realize who they are, you know, because they are, you know, the gift from the spirits, like, to the, you know, to their parents, who were able to bridge the gap between these rival groups, kind of.
I wanted to just say something quick about that, because
Yeah.
this is going to be a theme that, as we talk about story plot points, that I think all three of us agree on, but that I particularly won't stop poking Kelly about, is I think, like, them bringing in a story idea and then not fully developing it, or not planting it so that it's very obvious. One of the things that I was kind of missing with the parent story was, I feel like they were really trying to pull in themes, the theme of, like, that continued layer of growing up, right? Of growing apart from each other. That's a big storyline. You know, Elsa has to go off by herself. Anna needs to accept her role. She ends, you know, and accept that it's going to be separate from her sister. And that part of, you know, this, they're discovering who their parents are, which is something that every single human being with parents go through. You go from your childhood understanding of who your parents are, which is very topical, to a more in-depth understanding of who your parents were as people, and that they were normal people, and that they are flawed.
Yes.
And it does bother me a little that her parents are not flawed. That the flaw is in the grandparents. Again,
Right.
Kelly, you bring up, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, that there just seems to be a lack of serious consequences with the things that happen in this story, and that we have again brushed it off. But part of realizing, part of the journey of finding, you know, of growing up and realizing that your parents are people and adults, is she didn't discover any flaws about her parents, and I kind of wish that there had been a little bit of that.
Yes.
I have a counter argument to that, because in the first movie we saw the parents only as flawed, because they separated these two girls. They did not let them interact with each other. And when I watched the first one, I'm just like, man, the dad's a jerk. Like, he's just keeping his daughter locked in this room. And this gives a little more context to what they were doing behind the scenes. Like, they weren't just, like, malicious. They weren't, like, only afraid of their daughter and her power. They were actually really trying to get to the bottom of this and find the source of her power. And I think that's really important. And yes, like, when you only watch the first one or only watch the second one, it's like, wow, they're either really sucky or really great. But I feel like that kind of balances, if you watch them in kind of concurrently, it kind of balances that idea.
I love that too, because that will again hammer at the point that they had a lot of really good ideas that weren't fully fleshed out, because that is such a great point, but that's not something that immediately comes to mind. You have to think about it.
Yeah.
Like, I just watched your face, like, come to that realization as I was saying that. But I wish, you know, just from a story standpoint, that had been a little bit more obvious.
Right.
You know,
It's
that,
not
how
clear.
did his past motivate his behavior with else. You know, that though there were just so many little things that they were like, this theme, this theme, this theme, this theme, and then we didn't get the full explanation of that theme. There was too much. So loved the parents.
Yeah.
Think that the parents were just one thread in this giant story quilt, and I loved that they were there, but I think that they could have focused on them even more and dropped some of the other story standpoints.
Just like with the first film, and this is one of my biggest critiques of the film, is that they have too many pies. They got their hands in all the pies. Now it's just a pie blob. And it doesn't taste that good.
It's like trying to put too many colors into your tie-dye shirt. And then you unravel it and it's just like a big brown gray sploosh. And you're like, oh, I probably should have used like 3, but I used 15. And now it's a messy tie-dye shirt.
Yes. Yeah. Again, in my notes, after I watched it the first time, I wrote, it's a little spastic. They try to add too many things going on. They're not streamlining anything, because I really think focusing on Anna's dependence on her sister, Anna's, the first film was about Elsa's fear. This film is about Anna's fear. And 500 other things. But it's also 500 other things. And it becomes completely jumbled, a complete mess, just like the first one, where it's enjoyable to watch. We love sitting and watching it. It's beautiful. But we had talked about this while we were watching the movie. I really don't think this team has someone who can come along and just chop off, trim the hedge a little and make it actually cohesive. And they're keeping all of these elements where they really should they gotta go through and edit. They gotta edit it.
I think this is kind of an interesting story, not to get completely off topic, but during the Disney Renaissance, a wonderful, for you animation fans, if you have not watched it, there's a wonderful documentary called Waking Rapunzel.
Waking Sleeping Beauty.
Waking Sleeping Beauty, excuse me. You can find it on Disney Plus that Kate and I have both watched. That is about sort of the actual, the business side of why Disney was able to do what they did during the Disney Renaissance. And that they had leaders in place who were able to make decisions like that. And that certain things would happen that it's sad, and you can see people would be really upset, but the movies turned out better for it. The example being that Howard Ashman, the late composer, who's responsible for some of the best music that ever came out of Disney, and really some of the best musical theater music ever written.
I could go on like a 30-minute rant about how much I love Howard Ashman and how sad I am that we never got to see so much work of his because of his early passing.
For those of you who don't know, Howard Ashman passed away from AIDS, and he had been working on they had Beauty and the Beast premiered. He died. He didn't get to see it, and he had been working on Aladdin. Actually, he only did Beauty and the Beast because they made him. He was actually the most excited about Aladdin. He didn't even want to do Beauty and the Beast, and they were pretty deep into Aladdin. And whoever was in the decision chair said, "I'm sorry, this isn't working. We have to go back." And 3 of his songs ended up on the cutting room floor. Some of them had already been animated, and
one of which is my favorite song that has ever come out of Disney. Period. Which is "Proud of Your Boy."
And isn't that interesting though that from a story standpoint, they had to make the decision, I'm sorry, this isn't working, we need to do something else. And Aladdin is a triumph of a film. It's a beautiful film, it's cohesive, it moves right along. But those are the types of decisions that have to be made, and they are really uncomfortable. You can imagine the music department and the people who really loved Howard being absolutely livid. You cannot cut his final work out of a film.
It's so sentimental to them.
And it's so personal to him and to them and the people who had already animated that and done all of that work. And that's how many months of work that now just gets thrown away. But, to make something cohesive, you need someone who can say that. And I feel like they just ended up with these story plot points and a lot of beautiful animation, and it just seems like no one really had the ability or the gumption to say, no, this isn't working.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It with so many kind of elements to the story and not a lot of focus on only a couple, as opposed to we've got, you know, these 8 story ideas that we're all gonna put some kind of focus into. It creates such a kind of surface level development of the story. You don't you don't really get much backstory with the soldiers that are in the forest. You don't get a whole lot of backstory besides the parents' backstory with the indigenous peoples that are living in the woods, and it's all just very kind of surfacey, and there's not a whole lot of depth to it, unfortunately.
I will say that I think that is one of the things that holds this film back from being the type of film that an adult viewer can say, this is one of my favorite films. There are animated films that even can be family films. Kelly has introduced me to a whole lot of animation that's really only for adults, which is really cool. But I think that, and that's something that I think Disney almost knows they can get away with, is that their child viewing platform allows them to get away with some of that topical storyline, whereas the adults who are taking it in are kind of going, wait, what? Or what just happened? Or, oh, you know, it doesn't resonate as deeply with adults, but that's okay because the child element of it will carry it. But that's what holds this franchise back from, you know, like Kelly, you being able to say, like, Tangled is one of your absolute favorite films, hands down.
Yes.
The word animated is not in that sentence. It's one of my favorite films.
Correct.
I think Kate and I both have films that fall into that for us, that are animated films that are just one of my favorite films, like, hands down. One of my favorite films, hands down, will always be Pocahontas. I love Pocahontas. It's up there with, like, Lord of the Rings and stuff. I love that film.
Which is saying something for Laura.
And that's something that is holding this film back from being that for adults, is the lack of development of storyline. Is it fun to watch as a family? If it's on TV, will I absolutely sit and watch it?
Absolutely.
Yes, but is it something that an adult, like, you can really say, like, wow, this is, like, true universal entertainment? It's not, because of the holes in the storyline.
Exactly. One of the big plot holes that we were discussing while watching was Elsa going deep into, you know, the memories of the river, the frozen glacier, and then freezing there. And we were kind of confused by that piece, because it's you know, part of the lullaby is like, go too far and you will drown, or what have you. But it doesn't, they never really explain why that is. And we are still kind of figuring out what is the purpose of that, because, like, from a story standpoint, obviously it makes sense because they needed to get rid of Elsa so that Anna had to do things for herself, and that Anna had to kind of let go of her sister a little bit. But why did it actually happen? Like, how did that actually occur? And what was their analogy they were trying to make with...
It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor.
Right.
But the problem being is that, and it wasn't until this 4th time that I'd watched it, and because I had the benefit of being in the same room as Kelly and Kate, and being able to pause the film and ask them questions, it's obviously a metaphor about diving deep into emotion and diving deep into past, and do you really want to know these things, and kind of, again, talking about dealing with learning that your parents are real people, and that kind of coming of age thing of, if you go too deep, you'll drown. And it's almost asking that question of, like, you need to be ready, because these are things that you can't unlearn. Like, this is the real world, and the real world is flawed, and it's this metaphor, right? And so I was like, I'm on board with that. I understand that this is a life lesson metaphor, but the physical manifestation of the metaphor didn't make sense. And it was funny because before the sequence started, I paused it and preemptively was like, I don't think this part makes sense. And Kelly was like, well, let's watch it and watch it with that in mind. And then, Kelly, maybe you can speak of this, and we watched it and we got to the end and Kelly goes, Yeah, it did make sense. And she was really trying to be like, Laura, don't get ahead of yourself. Like, maybe this is going to make sense. Like, hold on. And then you were like, no. I don't know. Maybe it means something, but I don't know what.
My only answer is that, again, the writing was a little bit of a hodgepodge mess where, they need to get Anna to this point. Oh, well, we'll just have Elsa freeze. Like, well, that's a just slapping some, Elmer's
special
glue
effects
on that.
like, this is a cool effect, ice. Like,
and an homage to the original of turning to ice again. Like, okay.
And I feel like after watching this too, the three of us could write like an amazing fan fiction of this story and just like we could fix everything.
All of our changes.
Yeah, with all of our changes that we want. Because I actually think it would have been cool. They, for some reason, decided they needed this really cool graphic manifestation of that moment. But the fact that it's supposed to be this internal metaphor for feeling, like, go too deep and you will drown, like, I think it would have been really cool if we didn't see what happened to her. If she disappeared into black and called for Anna, and we don't know what happened to her.
Yep. Because then, with Olaf falling apart, you would feel it more. That would be more of an emotional response because you're realizing at that moment with Anna that Elsa is gone. Like, how much of more of an emotional impact would that have been? Not even seeing Elsa freeze, but just seeing Olaf disappear and him saying, I think there's something wrong with Elsa. Like, how much of, even talking about it just like this, I'm like, my heart is aching.
You're getting excited. I
like, because I can imagine what that would feel like.
And giving her that, like, because they wanted it to be this emotional metaphor and the opening of this like little emotional adult part of your heart that every person has to go through, I think that they could have even let her experience that more in the song and the scene leading up. She wasn't getting physically upset or scared, and I think that could have been really, really meaningful, that as she was discovering these memories, she was getting more and more upset and then disappears. And then we, like you said, then it's like, well, what happened to her? And then Olaf's like, something's wrong. And then it makes it a little bit more personal. It adds to the metaphor that it's this deep, dark place that each of us has inside of us, that no one knows what's in there, just you do. And that, like, I think that could have been really cool.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, they decided they needed a physical image to go with it. And it made it so that I think the younger audience members were probably just like, oh, but I think the adults were like,
wait, what?
Well, and with that, like, that increases the stakes, at least from an audience perspective. If you don't see what happens to her, then all of a sudden, like, oh, Olaf is disappearing, he's falling apart, like, and how it is in the movie, it's just kind of like, oh, she's frozen, but she is ice, like, that's her power, so it doesn't feel as, like, high stakes as it really needs to be.
We didn't understand what was happening. We didn't understand.
You know what could have been so cool? I'm just, like, rewriting all of this. I think that could have made an even better, like, change for Anna, and Anna realizing who she was and what she had to do and what was important, because if what had happened to Elsa had been a little bit more ambiguous, Anna choosing that, like, I have to step up, I have to make the adult decision. This whole time she's been chasing, like, literally sacrificing everyone for Elsa, and that this, like, adult awakening in her of, like, the next right thing isn't going after my sister. It's stepping up and realizing that I have to go help all of these people. I have to break down the dam. I've got to go back to Kristoff. Like, there are people counting on me. And yes, I don't know what happened to Elsa. And I know this is turning into a fan fiction podcast. But I think that it could have added, again, that beautiful scene of do the next right thing. It could have added more emotional weight to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing
here. You know, the wind comes from the cave, and it's like, do I go up to the to go find, I have to go to these people, or do I try to find her and I have to go do the right thing here? The right thing is not to be self-serving and go get her because she's my emotional crutch. The right thing is to be an adult and make the adult decision of other people counting on me. It could have, like, just leaving what happened to Elsa be a little bit more ambiguous, I think could have made both of their characters much stronger.
Agreed, wholeheartedly.
I think this is a good segue. Speaking of, I touched on the fact that I now really like that song, but that, this weird scene with Elsa turning into ice goes into Do the Next Right Thing. And it was just super confusing. Like, her emotions were just a little bit weird. And I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna open the can of worms. Now is when we're gonna talk about my biggest beef with this, Kelly. Are you ready? She's making a face.
She knows what's coming.
I have really... I have some major problems with Anna and Kristoff's relationship.
Here it is. Take the stage, Laura. Your TED Talk begins now.
It's
welcome to the TED Talk.
Unhealthy and weird. And they decide to deal with it by having him say that his love's not fragile, everything's fixed. And they have so many problems. Like, his answer should have been, I think we should do some couples therapy. Because they have problems!
So I'm dusting off Laura's feminist soapbox, and it's here.
Time for her to take her podium.
I'm going to step up on it. Okay, I'm on the box. I'm on my soapbox. And the reason that I say now is the time is that in that song, Do the Next Right Thing, she's singing about how everything she's ever depended on is gone. And I'm like, how about your life partner? I'm pretty sure that he's not gone. Some people would say, well, they added that one stupid line about how he went off into the woods with some guy. And so he technically left it. No, that's not even remotely developed enough for her to have that reaction. She sings this song about, like, the snowman and my sister are gone. Everything's over, the end, except for your life partner. It's not, okay, I need to gather myself. I think that in an effort to make Kristoff a good example of a patriarchy, non-toxic male, I think that we overcorrected.
Yes.
And that Kristoff is kind of a wuss. Because I think that they had a chance to put together a really, I think of a modern relationship and a good example being, one in which the woman isn't fulfilling the quote-unquote traditional role of a woman, which they clearly didn't want Anna to do.
Right.
That's an egalitarian relationship. It's a relationship of respect where both partners are equal. And we overcorrected to, instead of Kristoff being able to say, like, I love you a lot, but you're not meeting my needs in the relationship. Like, clearly, I guess I'm meeting yours because you're just running away from me all the time. Uh-huh. But my needs aren't being met. And instead of saying that, he's like, that's okay, I can take it, do whatever you want, I'll just do whatever you need for this relationship to work, which is not a good example for either gender, either party that's not a good example of a supportive relationship. I think that happened because they didn't know what to do with Kristoff in this storyline, but it's really, really, really wrong to me. It's wrong to me that it's not dealt with the fact that she is so obsessed with her sister when the person who is supposed to be her life partner is also there, and that that could have been unpacked a little more, but because they didn't do that, it just came off as like, this is a really unhealthy relationship, and it makes me really mad.
I think overcorrecting is the right word because, like, even when it comes to Anna and Elsa's relationship, Frozen is about these two sisters, and that is the core of the story. With the idea of overcorrecting, like, it's not, Frozen 2 is more about Anna's dependency on her sister than actually about their sisterly relationship. Yes. And I think in using that word overcorrecting, that applies to that relationship as well as Anna and Kristoff. I totally agree with you. I think that, in an effort to try to create a more quote-unquote modern relationship where, you know, she's not the damsel in distress, they flip-flop it, and she just, like, leaves him and ignores him for most of the movie.
And the one part where they, like, it's an egalitarian relationship is when he's like, what do you need? When he rescues her. Mm-hmm. Like, I love that, but it's not surrounded by supportive relationships, like, on either side of that. And I think that it could have been so much better. I think that they ended up giving him... And we started this by saying his song is our favorite in the... Like, we love that. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, so he gets this weird storyline where he comes off as a wuss because... we can't have a film where the main characters are all women. There has to be a boy in the film. He has to have a bunch of stuff to do and a bunch of screen time. What will we do? We've only made 800 movies with basically no women in them. But if we make a film with just women, it'll just be what'll the boys do? No, the boys can like Elsa and Anna. It's fine. Like, Kristoff doesn't need to be a wuss pushover in the woods. Yes, Kelly.
Yes. And...
Oh my goodness.
And just what you said, like, just because this is a film about sisters, about females, doesn't mean the male has to be, like, the male storyline surrounding the love interest. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that we want, you know, we want female characters who aren't just the female love interest. Mm-hmm. But we also don't want that for our male characters either. Like, in this story, he just has this random B plot that, again, is part of that hodgepodge mess of, like, let's narrow this down a little bit. Like, we spend so much screen time with this awkward... marriage proposal. It goes on the whole freaking film, and granted, like, some of it is funny, and Garrett was watching with us and even was saying, like, oh, this is real, guys, this is hilarious.
Garrett is my husband. I completely agree, Kelly. I think that he needed something to do. I think that
I was just about to say, we need to add to our Frozen 2 fanfic and say what Kristoff should have been doing instead.
That's literally what I just was going to talk about before I passed it back to you. Great. I think that they could have accomplished the same type of thing. The proposal could have been a part of it. Mm-hmm. I think that to allow this story to be about the sisters in the way that it needed to be... I think that Kristoff needed to be left behind in Arendelle to look after the people of Arendelle. I think that he should have had that, like, no, I'm coming with you, I want to protect you. Again, that would have been a good example of an egalitarian relationship if she was to say, like, I love you, I respect that, I can take care of myself, I need to go with my sister, and I need you to stay here. That's what what do you need me to do? I need you to stay here with your little troll dad and take care of the people of Arendelle, which would have been a good foreshadowing of her becoming the queen and taking care of these people and knowing what her people needed.
And it would have made that separation between the two of them, with Elsa staying in the forest and Anna being the queen of Arendelle, it would have made that separation, I think, stronger at the end.
For sure. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because you see, you're seeing the people of Arendelle more than the 2 seconds at the feast that they have at the beginning. Like, there's also Kristoff is part of that kingdom, and part of why Anna is a part of Arendelle, and Elsa is not necessarily.
Yes. And it's so important with, again, coming of age, that your siblings and your family are important to you, but for the majority of people, whether that's even just individual independence, or it's, you find a life partner and that's who you spend your life with, that's part of becoming an adult, right? Is that you and your sibling, you and your immediate family that you grew up with have to separate from each other, and you go on to live your adult life, and that's, they wanted this next step of coming of age to be happening, and I think that the whole thing could have been stronger if Kristoff had stayed home. I think they could have added some weird B-roll of whatever on earth he was doing.
Right, like he can still be goofy Kristoff that doesn't quite know all the social norms.
They could have, if they wanted him to just bumble around figuring out how he was going to propose to her, that should have been a huge subplot of, like, I was going to, this happened, and, like, just stupid, funny images of him like practicing with the people of Arendelle and the trolls, and them being like, "Oh, this is so bad."
Instead of, and like, if you really wanted like the backup singers in Lost in the Woods, he could have gotten lost in a part of the woods, and the trolls could have been his backup singers instead of the reindeer.
He
like,
still could have
a random
sung the
pack of
song.
reindeer. Yeah,
yeah, he still could have sung that. I just think that he needed, instead of just wandering around in the mist on a reindeer, it just would have been better if he had been back in Arendelle being a leader instead of being a loner wuss in the woods. God!
oh my goodness.
And we say this all with
love
because we care about Kristoff.
And that's where this is coming from. I feel like this is becoming a dump session, but the reason that we feel so strongly about these plot points is that clearly we care about these characters so much,
Yes.
and that when the characters didn't get what we thought they needed or what we wanted to happen for them. Like, I love Kristoff so much, and I think that he's such a strong character in the first film.
Yeah,
That
for
to then have him kind of become a wuss, it's like, no, he's goofy, but he's not wussy. Like, there's two different... He's a big, hunky ice hauler. He's like 8 feet tall. Like, what is going on? I don't...
This aspect of the plot feels very Disney sequel.
Yeah.
Like, what do we do with this character? Like, marriage proposal. And I will argue, too, that Disney has done this kind of plot correctly before, and it's Tangled the series.
Girl.
Yes,
girl. Thank you.
And because that's a major plot point for Eugene throughout
It's
the
a huge plot point.
entire series. Yeah, but the first time, you know, that he proposes to Rapunzel and she is not ready for that at all, and he comes and brings her a cupcake and they talk about it.
Because they have an egalitarian relationship built on mutual respect for one another.
Listen to all of my episodes on Tangled and Tangled the series, because Rapunzel and Eugene are seriously the best on-screen couple ever.
True.
They are represented so well.
And we just thought that's what Anna and Kristoff could have been, and they just didn't get there.
That's what we want for Anna and Kristoff, maybe in Frozen 3.
I have a slight transition out of Kristoff, because we're talking so much about Kristoff and how much we wish that they would have done a little better with it, or like we just wanted some stronger writing from Kristoff. And I think I'm here to make the defense that the character that was written the strongest in Frozen 2 was everyone's favorite little snowman, Olaf.
Amen!
And he's not quite, like, you know, he's not quite the focus of the story by any means, but just the little, like, kind of almost character nuances that they give him with the fact that he's aging, he's thinking and asking about maturity and what happens when you get older. That's his whole song, which is the best song. That Samantha joke, I have a side story here before I continue my talk about Olaf. I listened to the soundtrack before I saw the movie, and like I said, love the soundtrack. And when I listened to that song and they had the Samantha, I assumed there was going to be a new character named Samantha. And so I'm at the movie and I'm watching the movie and I'm waiting for Samantha to be introduced. And then the song starts and I'm very confused. And then the joke rolls out that there is no Samantha. He doesn't know anybody named Samantha. And that joke hit so hard for me. It was great. But I think they do such a good job with developing and maturing Olaf, and like having this foil to Anna as she's just like, I'm so needy and I need someone to depend on, and he's the one who's posing all of these questions to her. Like, well, what are you gonna do about that? Are you gonna get angry? Are you sad? Like, I don't know. I love how they wrote Olaf. Laura has a comment.
Kelly first.
I would agree. You'll remember when we talked about the first film, I hated Olaf.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Anti-Olaf, I was like, why does this character exist except to make 3-year-olds laugh? Yeah. This film rides on the strength of Olaf's character and is one of the best most well-written parts about this script is his dialogue, and the fact that it's not just, you know, so many animated films will fall into the trap of, oh, let's do cheap, like, poop jokes, because that'll get a laugh, and we don't feel like actually writing funny, clever things. But Olaf in this film and Josh Gad's award-winning performance provide the best humor ever.
I will say that, yes, I think a huge amount of the credit goes to Josh Gad.
Yes.
In bringing that, first of all, of making us even like him in the first one.
Right.
But second of all, just how beloved that character is.
One other plot point that I just need to address, and which is a really, really important thing for me about any story, is the fact that there are no consequences to the actions that take place in this film. We have 2 false deaths, which is very Disney sequel and is never done well. And the fact that the whole, you know, when I saw this the first time, they get to the dam the first time, Kristoff mentions, well, if that falls down, Arendelle will be destroyed. I immediately know, well, Arendelle's getting destroyed this film, but it doesn't. Elsa is able to save it. Like, there's no consequences. And for me, like, I really want a story to take the audience serious enough to have consequences. How to Train Your Dragon, I know. I talk about it every single episode. But is like my favorite example of the fact that they're going to treat their audience, their, you know, child audience too, as intelligent and giving them showing them, like, yeah, there are consequences to your actions, and there's loss, there's sacrifice in doing the right thing. So Anna is doing the right thing by, you know, she is basically willing to sacrifice Arendelle, and I personally, it's okay, it's fine that Elsa and Olaf are back. Like, I think that's great and fun, and obviously Disney doesn't want to, like, kill a whole bunch of really profitable characters. But Arendelle could have been destroyed, and I think that would have been great. And in our little fanfic here, Arendelle would have been wiped away. Kristoff and Anna would then rebuild it bigger and better. Why couldn't they have done that? Because all the people were already out and safe, and that was, like, the big consequence they were leading up to.
Yeah.
And then, granted, it was very visually awesome when Elsa comes and saves it, but, like, I just needed some more real consequences.
Especially because they were, again, undeveloped, this idea of, like, these 2 nations, and one is more developed than the other, and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, this whole thing happened because these 2 groups of people couldn't get along. And it could have been this big, beautiful, like, you know, Arendelle is destroyed, but here's this group of people you didn't even know existed, and now we're going to rebuild our world together. Yeah.
How
like
cool.
that. I feel like that actually kind of fit what they were tried to do in the beginning a little bit more, and that was part of, you know, this, we have to fix the wrong.
Right.
And alternatively, I'm just going to throw this under the bus. I think that if they were going to save Arendelle, Kristoff should have died. I think that would have just, guys, I can't get, we were watching this and I could just tell I needed to shut up because Kelly was like, Laura, we get it. You don't think they did a good job with Anna and Kristoff's relationship. But you know what? I think that could have been a big slap in the face of, like, you know what? You didn't take him seriously and you ran off with your sister and now he's dead. So that's real life.
I'm
Kelly is literally rolling on the floor right now.
I'm just thinking about this kind of concept of having consequences and kind of relating that to world building. And I think you know, I've listened to things where people are talking about how certain movies or TV shows, you know, they'll kind of build this world and they'll establish consequences. I think someone at some point throughout Game of Thrones as an example where they stopped watching the show because at some point the rules that they kind of built for this world got like thrown away, and they with certain things, and magic saves everything and there's no consequence for anything, and I feel like the first Frozen movie, as good of a twist as it was, where she is frozen and effectively dead and then Elsa saves her with her love, that created the cracks for Frozen 2 in creating a world where, there are no consequences because Elsa can just use her magic powers and bring everything back the way it was.
Absolutely. And these two ladies right here know how much I care about rules and world building rules. Ask me how I feel about certain fantasy or sci-fi things that don't follow the correct rules. I
Harry Potter.
Yeah. But I think that they created kind of a set of rules that they just decided there were new rules. I don't know.
And obviously, like you said, it's a kids movie, and you don't want to kill off all of your profitable characters.
It didn't have to be a kids movie. They relied on the fact that it was a kids movie and said, it's okay, we gotta sell the merch, the kids won't notice the plot holes, the parents will think the animation's awesome, so... Which, the animation is awesome.
The animation is beyond cool.
Great segue, because this film is... And we just watched it on Laura's, 5K.
5K Smart TV.
I'm like, what the crap is the world right now? This is fantastic.
And I think I mentioned that when we watched it. I think the last time you and I watched the movie together, we started kind of talking about some of these little holes that we could poke at within the plot. But I said kind of as we started watching it, I was like, you know what? We've discussed a lot of this stuff, but as soon as I turn the movie on and start watching it, I'm just like, I'm there. It's just so cool to watch.
Oh, yeah.
And the advancement in the animation and just the little details that they have are unbelievable.
I mean, in 6 years, it's like, looking at Frozen, the original now, it's like, I'm sorry, you can't even hold a candle animation-wise to this amazing beautifulness. There's just so many beautiful things going on. One of my favorite little tidbits about the animation is that the water, and we talk about this a lot, is like the water and making things look wet and just like all of that is very challenging. And what happened is they were creating, the water and making it look so realistic that they got to a point where they were like, they had to scale it back. Like, what you see, the final product in Frozen 2 is a scaled back, stylized version of water, because they had made it look so good that when Elsa stood there, it looked really weird, because Elsa is this very stylized animated character next to this very realistic looking water.
Who framed Roger Rabbit? Why is this animated thing in the real world?
Yes. and even that, I watch it and I'm like, this looks fantastic. Like the way Elsa gets washed around and then she's like back on the shore, she's trying again, like her hair is wet and like sticking to her face, and then the water is splashing up on the rocks, and like all of those little elements are just so fantastic, and really, really, really all of the effects in this film, but especially all of the water that is involved is fantastic and looks beautiful.
I will say, so I am someone who doesn't know as much about animation as Kelly. Kelly is an animator and an artist herself, and my experience with that is just loving Kelly's art and loving other people's art. So I don't know a lot about the technical side. I can say that when I consume live action films or theater, the things that are kind of my hobbies is hair and costuming. Like, that's what I love to help with in the theater, and those are the things that I pay a lot of attention to in live action films, which I know seems a little odd for some people, but that's just the part of it that I really love, is the authenticity and the craftsmanship that goes into sets and costumes and hair and wigs. And that they have done an unbelievable job when I am noticing those things about animated characters that they have been crafted in this with the same skill that someone, like, it's literally like weaving a cloth. Like, it's you've gone from someone drawing something to this style of animation is creation in the way that creation of physical things for other films, like, I am noticing the same things. I kept pointing out while we were watching it, I was like, look at the epaulette on his uniform.
Yes.
Look at the texture of that cloth. Look at the hairs, the individual little that, you know, strayed, breakaway, flyaway hairs on each person's head. Look at how, I think, Kelly, you brought up, you were like, look at the fading on the soldiers' uniforms. That have been, those little things that, like, you shouldn't notice about animation because it's not real.
Right.
But they've, like, this, the way that they are animating and this way that this world is created is almost like creating physical things for a live action film. And it's, you know, like, that's, to me, I have to step back and say, like, wow, I'm noticing things in this film the way that I notice things in live action films. And that's, it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing.
It absolutely is. And another shot I really love, it's very brief, but it's when the dam is breaking, the water is flowing towards Arendelle, and one of those shots is, like, these, like, evergreen trees and the giant rushing water, and it looks like a real forest. Like, those trees, like, it's just a moment, and I'm like, whoa, what just happened? This is insane.
Yeah. Just the level of detail, the type of animation that's being used, it's just, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And it makes you realize how it's exciting for movie making in the future. I mean, you look at things like Marvel movies where a lot of that technology is already, I mean, at this point you could, I think someone in one of your podcasts said, like, at this point you might as well just say that Marvel movies are animated films. Yeah. Because so much of it is CGI animation. Yeah. But, you know, they're getting to the point with some of this animation that it's so realistic that, like, at some point these films are going, like, they've just like, how do you even distinguish between one and the other? Because there's...
Everything is animated nowadays.
Yeah.
Literally, it's more unlikely that you're watching something without animation in it. Almost every film you go to in the theater is animated.
Yep.
Even if there are live action actors. That's just the truth.
It's just so, and it's exciting to watch it evolve, and that's something, Kelly, as you have exposed me to more and more animation. It's been really, really cool to just pay attention to that and to see it evolve, and that is one of the reasons that I will go and see, no matter how awful the plot points get, I will go see Frozen movies as long as they want to make them, because they are so beautiful. They are so beautiful. It's consuming a piece of visual art. It's like going it's like going to a museum for 2 hours. I don't, you know, here we are complaining about these plot points. Who even cares? It's basically like walking through a museum for 2 hours. It's just unbelievable art. It's just, I'm just taking in visual art for 2 hours.
Amen. A couple other things I really love animation-wise. One thing that's just throughout the entire film is all of the animators that worked on this, all of the acting that they portray is absolutely fantastic. One of my favorite examples is just like, it's just all these little things they do. Like when the parents are telling Anna and Elsa the story of the enchanted forest, and Anna is there, you know, and just like playing with her mom's hand, like little things like that. Or Into the Unknown is another good example for me. Is like, you listen to that song and you're listening to the soundtrack, and it's like that's one way, but like, and obviously like Idina Menzel did a fantastic job in like expressing what this character is going through. But you watch, like, animators are actors, and watching Into the Unknown is a different experience than just listening to Idina Menzel's voice. The animators that worked on the whole film, but especially like that whole song, it absolutely fantastic. She has all of these little subtle acting details in her face and little movements, and it's all of those little moments that is just so exciting for me, and really makes you feel like those characters are real and alive, because when you're watching a live action actor do something, it's just like, I mean, they're making physical choices, they're doing things, but it's also just like, oh, well, I, moved my arm. There are things that just happen naturally in a human that animators have to specifically engineer.
This is a really, really cool point, and you've just kind of inspired this thought in me, Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you think back to just the beginnings of animation and people who understood, and that's we're talking about a Disney film, and Disney is, he's who we have to thank for a lot of, the fact that I think so much beautiful animation exists in our world now, and that it can be consumed on a large scale. And that Disney, it represents this understanding that animation is an art that allows us to experience emotion and music and feelings on a deeper level that you can't experience with just music, you can't experience with just images, you can't experience with real life people. And I think that an interesting, because you were talking about Into the Unknown, and actually both of her songs have moments in them where the real world drops away and you're in a black space with her and all of this beautiful art swirling around her. And that to me is very Fantasia-esque. It's a lot of his early work that I think Disney was personally passionate about, and they weren't necessarily super popular at the time. A lot of people didn't understand it, but I think that that's kind of this cool, reference back to, why did someone push for this medium even to get to the point that we're at now? And it's because it is a medium that can express this, that nothing by itself can express, and this is the only way that you can feel this. Yes. And that is at the heart of why Disney was felt this way about animation and pushed some of these projects, and that here we are looking at this style of art that is so unrealistic you can't believe it, and it's like, oh my god, oh, that's so cool. Yes. I don't know if I expressed that well, but I just think that that's that has been at the heart of animation since the beginning of why would you make an animated film, and it's because this expresses this in a way that only this medium can. And that there are scenes in this film where they're actors and they're artists and they're animators are expressing emotion in a completely unique way, which is why animation exists.
Yes, everything you just said. And because in the animated medium, a storyteller has absolutely no limitations other than what you can imagine. Right. Because they can draw anything. And that's what this is. They're able to tell this story in this particular way and do these visual representations and make these symbolic choices in their art to portray a story that you wouldn't be able to in other mediums. Animation, guys! Animation!
That's why animation is not just for children, people.
Right.
It is not. It is beautiful. Kelly's got tears in her eyes right now. I love it.
It's so good. And it also brings me to a point of what we had been talking about over the course of this weekend was just that for me, watching animation, because I have such a high level of suspension of disbelief, watching animation for me feels more real than watching a live action film. Because in a live action film, my suspension of disbelief is less because I am seeing that these are actors, and I am in this framework of someone is producing this. Although that's odd to say because I still watch animation and I understand what could be going on behind the scenes, but with animation, and I think this is true for a lot of people, is you because you know it's not real, because you know it's animated, you don't have to have any, your suspension of disbelief can go away. You know what I mean? Like, you can put down your guard. You can put down your guard and just be like, this is the world of Arendelle. This is the kingdom of Arendelle, of course. You know, you're not going, oh, well, that CGI didn't look real. Like, you know, I hope that I'm explaining that well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yesterday, we were watching a few different things yesterday, and it was funny because we were taking in some entertainment that was on the same genre, or in the same vein about Vikings.
Yes.
And that Kelly introduced me to
Vinland Saga,
yes. An
yes.
animated story about Vikings.
Mm-hmm.
And I had Kelly watch the first episode of a live action action adventure drama called Vikings from the History Channel. And I also talked to her a lot about Last Kingdom, which is on Netflix, and that's a live action. And that I think you summed it up really well yesterday, Kelly. What you were getting at is, and maybe this has to do with your background in the theater and background in kind of technical aspects, that when you watch live action, you're thinking about the technical aspects of the production of the whatever we're watching.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're watching something that's animated, you just get to purely be in the story. And I know how much you love story and how much that drives you and how much like you just love taking that in, and that I think that that's really cool that for you, the animation, and I think for a lot of people, that you just get to purely be in the story rather than thinking about the technical side of things.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That is articulated well and is definitely where I'm coming from when I'm watching either animation or live action, and is why I can feel free to just fully immerse myself into an animated world, because this isn't, oh, they filmed this in Iceland. This is it. This is the world of Arendelle or what have you. Mm-hmm. Or this is Elsa. Mm-hmm. This isn't an actor who's playing this part. Mm-hmm. Like, and maybe Elsa is a bad example because we're all like, it didn't even sell. But this is this character, not an actor playing that character. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, I did like a ton of. I know we're already like an hour and a half.
Going. Yeah.
Yeah, we're an hour and a half into recording, but I have a ton of research I did, so let's dive into some of it.
This is one of my favorite parts of the podcast is actually like
listening to Kelly and her. This is what I found out.
I'm a huge consumer of like documentaries and stuff. So I've been talking about that documentary on Disney Plus. So I actually, when I listen to Kelly's podcast, these are my favorite parts.
Oh yeah,
tell us all about your research. I want to know, Kelly.
Great.
Lay it on us.
Well, note that I usually do all my research on Wikipedia, so I'm not like.
So does everybody else. It's okay.
So that's where most of this comes from. So don't hold me in too high esteem. But I did find it really interesting. A lot of things really interesting. One of which is that just the creation of this film at all. Like, obviously at the time, Frozen was, the highest grossing animated film. And so obviously Disney Animation wants to make more money because this was so profitable. But they were actually like, listen, if you guys should work on, to Jennifer Lee and Chris Buck, like, work on something that you're passionate about. If you have a story for Frozen 2, we'll do it, but don't force it, which I think was really awesome. And at first, they were working on completely different projects. They were not going to make a sequel, at least at the time. But when they ended up, working on that little Olaf short, they were like, oh man, I miss these characters, like these are characters that we actually could delve deeper into. And as well, one of the producers was getting so many questions about Elsa, like, where did her powers come from? All these things. Like, they kept hearing all this feedback from fans where they were like, actually, we do have some unanswered questions that we could explore. And so I like that, it wasn't necessarily something they were forced into, but that it seemed pretty natural that, hey, we have some things. And that's just like what I said earlier. This isn't your typical straight to VHS Disney sequel where it's like we're making a quick buck by saying by having this forcing a plot that doesn't make sense. It just needed to be a little more streamlined. So
I think they had about 4 films that they shoved into one. That was the problem. They had too many ideas. It wasn't that they didn't have a good one. It was that they had too many good ideas.
Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, it took a little longer too because the composers and they were working on the Broadway adaptation of Frozen, so they had to work on music for that before working on this, and they were obviously a big part of developing the story too because the music is the story. And what I love too is that I don't think people realize how much like animation, like it is a business. There are deadlines, okay? They're not gonna just like truly animators would mostly work on things forever until the end of time and never be done with anything because there's always something to improve on. But with animation, like, and with any film probably, like they're editing and working on stuff up until the deadline usually because it's set up that way. So quite often when you see a trailer, for example, for something, it's quite likely that that same sequence will look different in the final version,
Mm-hmm.
You see that all the time.
Yeah.
Lines are delivered differently. Things look different.
Scenes that you see in the trailer are nowhere to be found in the film.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of editing and things that are...
Great example of that is the Star Wars, the original Star Wars trailer where like the lightsabers are basically still just sticks. And it's not good at all, and there's no score, and it's like, what is this film? And then you see the film, and you're like, what? That's not what I was expecting from the trailer. So
yes.
Yeah.
And so I think it's still interesting, though, that as of mid-June of 2019, so just a few months before it's supposed to come out, there was still like 7 weeks of animation that needed to be done and 10 weeks of special effects. Like, I love it. Please forgive me as I pronounce this nationality. The filmmakers collaborated with Sami experts on depicting the fictional Northuldra tribe, so that group of indigenous peoples, and actually formed like a collaborative agreement between the Walt Disney Company and the Transnational Sami Council and the Sami parliaments of Finland, Norway, and Sweden. So this is a good example in being in the right direction of like, okay, we want to take inspiration from this group of people, but we want to give them credit where it's due and not just steal their artistic liberty, like their artistic...
we don't want to appropriate their culture.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's really cool. So Frozen 2 had a team of 800 people.
Oh my god.
Oh dang.
No wonder they had trouble organizing and getting this done. That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people. 80 animators.
Wow.
A ton. The head Elsa animator, Wayne Unten, again, sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I thought it was interesting that they focused Elsa's movements on dance and like the work of Martha Graham, and that was kind of an inspiration for her movements because he didn't want Elsa, even though she has these powers, to look like a superhero. So they were the animators on that team were specifically told to not make her look like Frozone.
I wonder if anyone on that team is really good at makeup application in real life.
Oh, because Elsa's makeup
Her makeup is on point.
Well, that would probably be more like a texture department.
Whoever is responsible, I would like to come and build some looks for me. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes.
Because Elsa's makeup was on point. Although she slept in it, which was not a good example.
No.
She got to take that off.
Yeah.
You're going to get zits, girl. You're going to break out.
She's magical. She
is
doesn't
magical.
get this.
She doesn't. Disney characters
She
don't
just
have
takes
this.
off in her full makeup and her Swarovski crystal cape into the unknown and flies away.
Her high-heeled boots.
Kelly, go ahead and keep talking. I promise. I'll just.
Oh no!
I'll wait on my soapbox.
I
in the corner.
love the interjections. It's great.
Me and my soapbox will just be over here.
You and your soapbox. I always know to bring out the soapbox when Laura's on the podcast.
I haven't talked about Anna's shoes yet. We might not get there, but it's another very passionate subject that I feel.
I think we stopped the movie like 8 times to talk about Anna's shoes.
I was just getting so tired of you talking about Anna's boots, I just like screamed at you.
Okay, first of all, they're like Louboutins. Second of all, they've got like purple highlight underneath. Okay, fine, we're doing it. Clearly it's happening now. I think that it's really funny that this film was touted as like, it's about girls and like woman power and blah, blah, blah. And there were just so many things that happened that were so, as a woman, angering because they were things that weren't actually real. I didn't feel empowered by these characters. It didn't make sense to me. I also like... You were talking about suspension of disbelief, but at some point I'm also supposed to believe these are real people, and I just don't think that Anna would take off on an adventure in 3.5-inch heeled boots and like a dress, and that like the line that I constantly saying, and people get so mad at me, is I will go like, oh, we're going to take off for a magical forest. Let me go get my high heel boots and my glitter cape and we'll be on the way. Like, no! Kristoff is at least wearing something that fits a little more. It's fall. It's not the middle of summer. Mm-hmm. They need coats and hats. And then Anna's like spelunking through this wet cave in her high heel boots and running full strength like across that bridge, let alone running through the underbrush.
And it is a cobblestone bridge. Yeah. She would like roll her ankle or trip or something.
You know what? You know what could have been our real life consequence? Anna wore the wrong shoes and she died on the dam because she couldn't run fast enough. Because her clothing, I just hated the fact that it's like, here's our character sleeping in full makeup, wearing high heel shoes in the woods. There were these feminist issues that I hated. I heard so much hype about how there was this huge deal that these girls were going to wear pants, and I'm like, they're wearing leggings under dresses. What type of male a-hole gave them high heel boots and leggings and said woman power? Like, it's really... I'm sorry, like, as...
That whole concept of, like, she can be strong and independent and also wear a dress. Like, that's so outdated.
That's so outdated and so stupid, and the reason that I'm so angry about it is I come from a background of I am a hunter and I am a camper and I go on big outdoor adventures with my family, and, like, being prepared is a big deal and wearing the right clothes is a big deal. And, I mean... To be fair, yeah, she took off up the North Mountain in a dress the last time.
That was going to be my argument.
Yeah, I didn't like that either. But that specifically this time, and I think the reason that it bothered me the most was because I heard in several interviews them talking about the fact that they were going to wear pants. And that making it be like, oh, this is a movie about girls, and girls can do anything. And I just felt like this is still just this... bizarre male vision of what women should be like. Mm-hmm. And like for me, I'm like, no, you know what they should be dressed like? Laura Dern in Jurassic Park, because that's what you wear when you go on an outdoor adventure.
Instead of Bryce Dallas Howard in Jurassic World. We don't need any more of that.
Correct.
Where she's running around in heels.
Well, and she wasn't supposed to like know what she was doing, to be fair. But no, I thought that was silly. Outrunning a dinosaur in high heel shoes, for God's sake. No, that like, yeah, if you're going to take off into the woods, you're going to wear hiking boots and you can still be stylish, but no, that was just a huge missed opportunity. And it really made me upset that we're sleeping in full makeup and wearing 3.5-inch heels on our outdoor adventure to go spelunking, and also landing directly on our knees on rocks and just standing up and walking.
It hurts
Kelly
to
and I
watch.
both noticed that.
We audibly gasped.
She like jumps like a 10-foot ravine wearing her high heel boots off of
lands
wet rocks
on her kneecaps.
Yeah, she breaks those suckers.
Oh, and first of all, her lung capacity, because she just keeps right on belting those high notes.
Yeah, she keeps singing.
Even though she's just landed on her kneecaps and then just keeps spelunking in her high heel
Maybe
boots.
she's just done like a lot of cardio alone
God.
in the palace for
How many
years.
little girls are going to just fall off of like a swing set because they think that they can jump the ravine like Anna? Like, no, you can't. You need really
that's a life lesson that they need to learn. Maybe breaks their wrists at the
Just
same
hope
time.
they're wearing flat shoes when they attempt it. Maybe they have a chance. Okay.
Yeah.
I promise I'm off my soapbox. We're getting down. Here. I stepped off the box.
You've
done.
been on that box for a long time.
I know. I live on that box.
Oh, I love it. I wanted to also mention the spirits, the 4 spirits, and their design are really just fun and different. You know, you've got the horse, the water horse, the nook or how they pronounce that. Love it, absolutely adore it. And then Gale, the wind, you know, and cute little Bruni, is that his name? Little lizard.
Yeah. And then the Earth Giants.
And the Earth Giants.
The one thing that I thought was really interesting, and I wonder, Kelly, if you have an opinion on this, is that I thought that the choices for each of them weren't super cohesive as like a grouping. Like is it Bruni, you said?
Yes, it's Bruni.
Bruni is really cutesy and highly stylized, and then the horse is like this wild. And I know they were going for this idea that like fire is like, it seems like raging and angry, and then it's cute and little and innocent. But I just felt like there wasn't, like, Gale wasn't physically manifested other than in leaves. Like, it's Pocahontas, basically.
Yeah.
And then the giants, I felt like the giants were kind of a mix of the horse and Bruni, but that the horse and Bruni were just, like, completely different stories. It was kind of, like, he was almost like the troll of this, like, the trolls in the first one where you're like, they don't really go with the rest of this world. I just kind of felt like he didn't, I loved him. I loved the idea of the physical manifestation. I just thought that stylistically, all 4 of them were so different from each other that they didn't feel super cohesive. What do you think?
I think it's true that they're not, but I think I like it this way.
Oh, okay.
I think I do, because it doesn't feel like it's like the 4 elemental things that are all the same except different colors. You know what I mean? It's like these are completely different, distinct, individual character designs, even though, again, it's not really like a character, but it is. Like, they're one of my absolute favorite artists from the film is James Richard Woods, and he's on Instagram at Jamwoodser, so JamWooodser, and he did a ton of concept art for these spirits and helped develop the look of them. And it's really interesting to see the different phases of development of where they were going with it. And I also think it's helpful that they're all so different in order for us to accept that Elsa is one of them. Because I don't think Elsa, like, take any of those, those designs and make them all that one design, like Elsa, you know what I'm saying?
Kind of. I guess that I feel like Elsa, she's so sophisticated that I think that she fits with Gale and the horse, and that they're these like beautiful, more adult, kind of ethereal, kind of not as concrete and developed as like the land giants and Bruli were just, they seemed a little bit more cartoon side of things, and the other 2 seemed a little bit more magical and realistic, and that I think that she personally fit with the horse and with Gale better than she fit with the other 2, because the other 2 just seemed like the funny animated sidekicks in an animated movie.
That is fair. So, do you have an answer for, in your fanfic version of Frozen 2, what they should have been?
I think that they could have been the same things. I think they just should have been animated in the same style. I think it could have been a cute little lizard. I liked the idea that it's, fire can appear really scary, but that's the idea that they were trying to portray with that element. He just looked a little bit too cartoony. I think that he could have looked more realistic, more like a really like fiery, scorpion-y thingy. And I think that the giants could have been, they were kind of menacing, but it was funny because I almost said, like, I bet the trolls are related to the land giants. I thought they looked a little cartoon trolly and a little bit like, I think that they actually could have been a lot scarier. And a little bit more jagged and a little more realistic. They looked like dumb trolls. Yeah. Very kind of like almost Lord of the Rings trolley kind of thing. And I wish that they had been a little bit more menacing. Yeah, that's what I would have done. I just would have made them a little bit more serious. I think that you already have two funny sidekick characters in Sven and Olaf. I don't think that they necessarily needed another and I say this as the second he comes up on the screen, I was like, he's so cute. I love him so much. But thinking about it from a development standpoint of like the wind is literally just leaves and then the horse is this beautiful, elegant waterfall thing. I just think that they could have actually done a better job of that she is one of these things if they had been cohesive with her. I think that would have been cool.
Yeah. Excellent point.
Yeah.
The only other piece of my research that I really wanted to mention, and will segment into my final question for you guys about Frozen 2, is the fact that Frozen 2 has surpassed its predecessor in box office sales. It is, at this moment, number 2 in the list of highest grossing animated feature films, right behind The Lion King remake, which again, I disapprove of. But regardless, it is The Lion King remake, Disney's other largest, most profitable franchise. Number 2 is Frozen 2, and number 3 is Frozen. Highest grossing animated films of all time at this moment in recording. So the question then remains, what's going to happen in Frozen 3?
Wow. Yeah, that's a great question. I also think it's a really interesting point. I think that it did much better than or it did surpass the first one, simply because I think people knew that it was going to be good.
Yeah.
Even if the story wasn't good, we talked about, like, as an adult, like, I take my kids to see that because I know it's going to be a gorgeous film.
Oh, yeah. And
I will enjoy it. The one thing, I think the reason that this was able to surpass Frozen was because unless you were a fan of animation, for an adult to go see Frozen in the theater, there wasn't a lot of motivation for an adult because you didn't know what it was. Right. I saw it in the theater. I was living in Chicago, and we went and saw it because my mom and my little brother were visiting, and there was a little theater downtown, and that was the family movie that was playing. And I had seen it, and I'm like, oh, I bet it's really beautiful. I've seen the ads for it. I don't know what it's about. It's called Frozen, so let's go see it. And it was like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever seen, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that is probably why the second one was able to do so well, is that people knew what it was. No one knew what the first one was, and it still it became this overnight sensation. Then people flocked to it and went and saw it. And this one, literally every person knew, like, I know what this is and I want to go see it.
Yeah. And I think that makes an excellent point for a ton of movies on that list of highest grossing animated films. Most of them are sequels.
Yep.
Because of that exact fact. Because people know what to expect and they're wanting more of it. And that's why franchises do so well. Look at the Avengers as an example. Like, that's, I'm sure I should look up, like, just films in general, but they're probably on that list too because people know what to expect.
Yeah.
So
Frozen 3.
What do you want from Frozen 3, everybody?
A healthier relationship between Kristoff and Anna.
And I should mention, of course, Frozen 3 has not been announced at all. We're definitely speculating, though.
Maybe a little higher stakes within the plot, make it seem a little more.
Someone's gotta die.
Something big has to happen to bring them back together, because Frozen ultimately is about the two sisters.
I'd love to see the world expand even more. I'd love to see the people of this make-believe land have to band together and journey off into a completely
different country.
Yeah, that's when you think of things that do really, why the Avengers series has all these different characters in different worlds, right? And that's exciting. I think of, now I'm going way off of kilter here, but things that get you excited and world building, right? There's a series called Westworld on HBO. I don't know if either of you, I know Kate has watched it. But they, in the second season, literally visit a different world. They go to
Shogun World.
Shogun World. They're in Westworld, and we get to visit Shogun World, and it is literally a different world, and it is so exciting to watch your characters experience that other world. And so I would love to have them go, and not even like, let's leave the Norse area. Let's leave that, and like, let's go somewhere completely different, and take our characters and their knowledge of the world and put them in a completely new space. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Especially knowing how gorgeous the animation would be if they had like a completely different world to build. Oh my god, that would be amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you think they would do any major time jumps?
Yeah, that could be a possibility. I mean, I was trying to think about like How to Train Your Dragon. I mean, they do some time jumps. I don't remember how significant they are.
The first to the second is like quite a few years. It's like 5 years or something. The second to the third is less than that, but then the third ends with like the biggest time jump of all. So they do a lot of skipping.
Well, and it would be nice to see like maybe skip a couple years, and Anna has been queen for a little bit, and kind of seeing where she's at with that, if she's having any problems, as a leader, and what she's kind of facing up against that, and how much older Olaf is.
Yeah. The one thing that I would not want them to do, because I think they would fall into the trap of the Disney sequel, is I don't think that it would be prudent to jump so far enough ahead that Anna and Kristoff have children. Because I think the story still needs to be about them, and I don't necessarily want it to be about them being parents.
Yeah.
And I don't think that would resonate with children, and then the story would end up being, like, I think that if they are going to do a time jump, they can't have kids in it.
Yeah. I fear it's still, like, a possibility, but I do think that, at least based off of this sequel, they are focusing more on Anna and Elsa specifically, so if they did do a time jump like that big, that would be challenging. Yeah. I don't think at least that would be in line with what they want to say. And again, who knows, maybe it could take a long time for a third one to be made, because maybe they won't have an idea for a little while, just like with this sequel. So
I think if we're going to get anything, it'll be a la Tangled the series, which would be a different style of animation. And I think we could get some really cool stories about Elsa and the people. What is the name of the tribe?
Northuldra.
I think that we could get some really cool stuff going on with the Northuldra. That was, for me, that seems to be the only reason why those two characters had names or anything to do, is that we're planting seeds for interesting storylines within that world. Otherwise, I'm not sure why those two, Honey Bear or whatever her name was, and the other one, I think that we could, that is a whole other, Kate's laughing at me.
Honey Bear and Dipper Pines.
Dipper Pines, it's Jason Ritter, that's all I care about.
But I think that we could get, a really cool, some short stories or even a series out of that group of people and those characters. I actually think that's more likely than another Elsa Anna story. It would allow them to build the world a little bit without worrying about ruining their beloved main characters.
Absolutely. And it does feel a little weird where they left the story now of Anna being queen, and now they're separated, which is a big piece where it's like, that seems so like something really big has to happen for them to come back together, I don't know. And so I feel like they either have to go really big, like you said, with going outside of the kingdom of Arendelle, or they have to bring it back into a smaller sphere and have it be about their kids.
And I don't want that.
No. Yeah. But here's what I do see. I feel like, watching it this time, I was like, now Elsa really is the Snow Queen. You know?
Mm-hmm. I don't think Elsa's ever going to have a romantic relationship. I think that she is an elemental outside of almost human thing. And I don't think that she's going to have a romantic relationship. I don't think that certain human things about her should apply to her. I think that she is like an elemental, more ethereal character. And I think that the human stuff should be the other characters.
Mm-hmm. And here's my argument for her not ever having a significant other, which would still be fine either way. But one of my favorite little bits of this film is at the beginning when they're kids and Anna and Elsa are playing with these little snow dolls. And of course, Anna is just like, everyone's making out with everyone. And Elsa,
they all get married.
They all get married. And Elsa is very vocally like, ew, gross, no. You know?
And I think that was purposeful.
I think that's purposeful.
I think they were trying to make a statement of like, this is not part of who her character is.
It's not part of her character.
I mean, she's a woman who can wear her hair down and wear, sheer dresses in the middle of winter. She's not of this world. She's a different being. And I think that she is kind of more of an ethereal character.
Which is why I think it would be interesting to have Frozen 3 and have Elsa be a, and which I don't know if they do this, or if they do like some sort of side story where Elsa really is the Snow Queen and there's a separate character or group of characters that are interacting with her as the Snow Queen and not knowing her as the Elsa princess that we know.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, just
completely
letting Elsa like have her own adventure on the side and kind of
like she is as her identity is now, not her identity connected to Arendelle, but her identity as the Snow Queen that she is.
Which is
that'd be pretty cool.
That'd be interesting.
Thank you guys for talking about Frozen 2 with me.
Thank you for having us.
This was a blast.
This is awesome.
We definitely need to talk about more Disney films. I've been kind of like on an anime streak for a while, so we need to get back to it.
Listeners of Fanimated, fans of Fanimated,
Fanimators.
Kelly has talked to some different people about Disney films, but I like to consider us kind of the Disney crew. If you have enjoyed the talks that the three of us have had about Disney films and you have any suggestions for other Disney films that you would like the three of us to talk about, please let Kelly know and we will definitely talk about those.
For sure.
Yeah. Yes. Message me on Instagram at Fanimated Podcast or email us at fanimatedpodcast@gmail.com or literally any of the other social media sites that I'm on.
And note that you will get a feminist soapbox in that podcast.
Yes. Laura always has her soapbox with her. She brings it wherever she goes. It's bedazzled.
Yeah, it's bedazzled feminist soapbox. There's an ending soundbite for you.
I'm here for the soapbox.
And it's bedazzled.
In my mind it is anyway.
Yeah.
All right, thanks again, and we'll talk to everyone later. Bye.
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 Thanks so much for listening. If you want to hear more about our Kristoff woes or hear what we had to say about the Frozen 2 documentary, you can hear bonus content by becoming a supporter over at patreon.com/Fanimated. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Fanimated Podcast to stay up to date with all things animated, and don't forget to leave a rating and review telling us what you'd like us to watch next. The music is provided by Purple Planet Music and the art is done by myself. You can find me on Instagram at CandorDraw. Thank you to Kate and Laura for joining me in discussing Frozen 2, and until next time, stay tuned and stay animated. Ferg, do you want to say goodbye?
Into the unknown!
Can you roof? Roof!